Hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Flatout Racing Network's coverage of the 11th race of Season 6 of the Great Lake Truck Series here today at Watkins Glen, playoff race number 2. Apologies for the late start, but Nathan Nicholson has been dominant ever since the drop of the green flag. I'm Seth Cole, being joined by Alec Kolonix, and Alex, obviously, so far, we've been kind of observing that the battle for second place has been really the one to watch as Nicholson's kind of just out on his own.
Yeah, very reminiscent of the race last year here at this track where Ashton Lawson pretty much dominated the race, but this time around, new driver behind the wheel in the 99, Nathan Nicholson. And right now, yeah, like you said, it's the battle for second with nearly a 10-second lead going on to lap 14 for our leader. It's not looking like there's high hopes for anybody else in this race without a caution.
Middle race of the first round here for the playoffs, and you were documenting in the early going a couple of our playoff contenders with some issues and maybe finding themselves in a sticky situation heading into Kentucky next week.
Yeah, massive playoff troubles for the 25 of Brandon Barkuski and the 37 of Elliott Henderson. Made contact lap 1. They are currently the last two cars in position on the racetrack right now. And for Elliott Henderson, who was sitting third in the point standings, it might not be as bad of a cost as it is, on the other hand, for Brandon Barkuski, who was only 9 points above the line after that incident. And even worse than that is the person he's fighting with is actually a spot below due to Michael Senzi, one of our playoff drivers, not participating in the race today. So already, only one lap into this event, we already had several playoff drivers in dire situations, and that's bound to carry on for the rest of this race.
We're following the battle for second place right now. Jake Miller, Hunter Madalinas, Zachary Henry, Christopher Heller, all here nose to tail going through the bus stop on the back straightaway. This taking place almost 10 seconds behind Nathan Nicholson. Another driver that's had some issues here in the early going as well, Shane Nicewonger, sitting on pit road. But you brought up the fact no Michael Sensi in the field here tonight. Same for Ashton Lawson. Few drivers here for this series down in that Florida area. Of course, we know that Hurricane Ian, I believe, has already made landfall there, and so, you know, not running the risk of showing up here tonight, preparing for that upcoming storm. Obviously, our thoughts are with all of the drivers and everyone that's down in that area that is going to be affected by the storm. But, you know, for some of those guys, like, say, Michael Sensi, does this mean he's going to have to go into next week at Kentucky in a must-win mentality?
I mean, it's pretty much looking like it. You know, even with Barkuski's crash here, he was still below him in points, and without getting any points from this race event, he's going to be well below the playoff line. I mean, drivers below him, Austin Moore, RJ Williams, Josh Cottle, pretty much all of them are doing relatively decent today, and actually all of them inside the top 10, only exception being Lewis Woodall further back in the field, but that's going to spell trouble for both him and Barkuski heading into Kentucky.
Of course, for Josh Cottle, he had not the performance he was looking for last week in the opener of the playoffs at Talladega. Saw the Cinderella story with James Shiflett, but right now, solid outing for the 32 truck. Pretty much just trying to, I think, today gain back the points he lost last week and then look ahead to see what the scenario is going to be for him when we get to the Bluegrass State.
I mean, that's essentially the goal here for just about everybody, is just hang on, because it's going to be rough. I mean, a lot of guys today, they're doing a good job already. Most of our top 10 is playoff drivers tonight, despite the troubles for some of the other ones. They were in the top 10 prior to the wreck between Barkuski and Ellie Henderson. So all these drivers doing what they needed to do, but just problems with Talladega is going to carry all the way down to Kentucky.
He's right on board with Hunter Madalinas looking ahead to Jake Miller. Of course, the Watkins Glen International Raceway, maybe the one road course that everyone has logged the most laps at. We've been to a couple of interesting tracks road courses during the course of this schedule. Long Beach is a track that we were at that probably these drivers don't have too many circuits at, but it just kind of seems like Watkins, Glen, and Sonoma, but even more so the Glen, it's that one track where everybody's kind of on a level playing field because they've got a lot of experience here, whether they consider themselves a road course ace, a road course ringer or not.
Yes, and despite the fact that you could say just how many laps people have logged around here, it doesn't seem to matter, as this always seems to be the track that, despite its immense simplicity, the guys who can figure it out here at this place are just so much faster, hence the 99 of Nicholson, our current leader, with a very, very large gap, although I believe he may have just made a mistake because he just lost a full second to the driver in second.
And also losing a spot was Jake Miller, we saw there. Madalinas made the move on him out of the final corner, turn 7, down the front straightaway. Zachary Henry looked to capitalize as well. He was alongside of Jake Miller heading up towards the S's, turns 2, 3, and 4, but not able to complete the pass just yet. He will slot back in line behind that Ream Chevy Silverado. And of course, we documented at the beginning of the playoffs, a lot of pressure on Jake Miller coming into this season as the defending champion. Had a decent outing last week at Talladega, following it up with a top 5 run here today at Watkins Glen. So at least for the moment, looking like the defending champ is going to be pretty safe to move on to the next round.
Yeah, I would especially say as long as things do not go horrendously wrong from here on out in this event, looks like Nicholson should advance, Miller should advance because he's quite good at these 1.5 mile tracks coming up next week, but that's not really the focus right now. The focus right now is that battle for the 3rd position between him, Zachary Henry, and Christopher Heller behind these 3 right under a blanket here.
You just saw the 95 of Tyler McClellan on pit road. Also in this lap, we included Eric Kempf, Gavin Fitzgerald, Steve McLean was in, Hunter Brittle, Trent Curtis. So some drivers that were just in the latter half of the top 10 to about the top 15, top 16 positions coming to pit road. So what's the strategy call here for these guys? Because they're coming in a little bit sooner than other drivers inside the top 10. Do fresh tires gain you anything on an outlap here and allow them to be able to pick up a spot or two once the cycle's around, as we got more coming in this time, including Miller?
Well, if you just look at your leader right now, the time, his current last lap compared to his fastest lap of the event, these drivers are almost 2.5 seconds off their initial pace, and so the tires are definitely going to make a difference for certain. And with us reaching just about the middle point of the race here, or maybe not the middle point, but at least the point where 2 stops would be the most viable to split it up evenly, is a good time to try and get tires and try and gain as much time as possible, especially with our leader so far out.
Kind of feel like at this point in time, with Nicholson out in front and of course Shiflett getting the victory last week, we're almost kind of pulling what's happened in the playoffs for the NASCAR Cup Series, the non-playoff drivers taking the checkered flags, which is putting more of an emphasis on points for the playoff contenders, more of an emphasis, I think, as well on consistency to make sure you advance into the next round.
Oh yeah, consistency has really been the story of this entire year for a lot of guys. It's just been, wins have been surprisingly hard to come by for a good number of these drivers. I mean, we've seen several surprise victories so far this year, guys coming out of left field to get wins, and our regulars really having to rely on pure consistency to be able to make it. Several playoff drivers from last season not being able to make it this time around. And I think that's the difference between the guys we have the playoffs this year versus last year, was you got the most consistent and the guys who could break through and win compared to the mix of drivers from last season.
Nathan Nicholson leaving pit lane. He was down pit road along with most of our top 5, Madalinas, Henry, Heller, and Austin Moore also in that lap. We almost had ourselves a moment there with the 2nd place driver Madalinas, though, as he had to swing around last week's winner James Shiflett in order to get onto pit lane. Both drivers were utilizing that entry lane there on the inside of turn 7 and almost had the 9 running over the 28.
I mean, you gotta be careful with that pit entry around here to get onto pit road here. is to carry that apex through the final corner. It's a very tough place to get onto pit road, especially with traffic in front of you, as you want to carry as much speed as possible. Not speed, but at the same time, there's drivers in your way of you trying to slow down, so very lucky for the number 9 to not make contact there. And I think for our 4 driver here, Jake Miller, he was probably hoping to jump that 9 car in the pit lane, just didn't seem to have as quick of a pit stop as he needed, and is going to be on slightly older tires.
Green flag pit stop cycle is nearly complete. We are waiting on one more driver. That would be the 52 of Ross Brockman, currently being scored in the 10th position, but he is still yet to come to pit lane since the drop of the green flag. Nicholson reemerges with the lead. Madalena still in second. Miller, Henry, and Cottle now the top 5. Remember, Cottle came to pit road a lap before most of the other drivers inside the top 5, so he was able to gain that one spot we were talking about with those fresh tires, able to leapfrog Christopher Heller, who's now back to 6th.
Yeah, that's essentially the idea here, is if you're going to pit early, you want to try and at least jump 1 or 2 positions of the competition in front of you. Otherwise, you're going to be at a massive disadvantage on those older tires. Once these tires start to fall off here at the road course, they fall off very, very hard. And so for Josh Cottle, he's glad to have gained that position.
Heller right now running in the 6th position. Just behind him, you've got the 1 of Brent Kingcott. We've seen him. Oh, we got trouble in the back. Contact. Oh, they didn't spin, but they almost ended up having a wreck there, did Austin Moore and Tyler McClellan for the 8th position. I just barely caught the tail end of that. You can see the damage on the right side of the 95, on the left side of the 91. I don't know if someone got loose or if they just wanted the same piece of real estate coming out of the bus stop, but they both nearly just threw away a top 10 run.
Yeah, from what it sounded like on the driver radio, it sounds like Austin Moore clipped the rumble strips quite awkwardly on the exit of the bus stop, made contact with the 95, so that's likely what happened there. He probably overshot the corner a little bit, got on the rumble strips, maybe into the grass, and made contact.
That's one thing about these rumble strips here, too. They're there really, for the most part, for drivers to be able to see the boundaries of where the racing surface ends and the grass begins. They can utilize them here through the bus stop to help them be able to turn, but for the most part, they don't necessarily help you out as much as people might think they do.
Well, I mean, the bus stop is pretty much the one place where if you're not taking the rumble strips here, you are simply going to be slower, hence why it's so much darker paint. That's just all the tire rubber being laid down, and it's probably the most difficult corner on this racetrack. You go through there, and you just have to trust that your truck is not going to end up getting loose and sliding sideways, or that you're going to end up jumping so high off the curb you can't get it pointed for the next left-hander through the center. So it's a very difficult place, very easy place to make mistakes, and as we saw with the 91 and 95, it's going to happen probably multiple times tonight.
Watching this great battle here between the Chevrolet of Jake Miller and the Toyota Tundra of Zachary Henry. Don't forget Zachary Henry. We saw him break back into victory lane after a long winless spell back at Montreal, so definitely a guy that can get it done at the road courses. Has not yet been able to get around that Ford truck, and Watkins Glen, maybe as opposed to other road courses as well, there's a number of passing areas to be able to utilize. Of course, that wide runoff area there in turn 1, we see drivers utilizing that area of the racetrack. The bus stop, drivers will try and set up a pass there, and then right through that carousel as well. A lot of those particular places, though, it really just comes down to throttle control.
Absolutely, though. From what I've seen with these vehicles around this road course in particular, the problem seems to less be getting the power down and more so getting the front end to steer through the corners. Usually they set these up to have a lot of drive off because of these big 90-degree corners and heavy braking zones. You could usually get the thing pointed under brakes, but the problem is drive off. So what they do is just give it a lot of drive off, but that means you can't get it turned, and that was very different from Montreal earlier this season, where the biggest thing you wanted the car to do was just not spin the rear tires. It was the hardest thing to avoid, so totally different driving style here tonight at Watkins Glen.
from the front of Zachary Henry, you can just see how abrasive this racetrack is. It's not smooth out there. Look at how the trucks bounce over that entering rumble strip into the bus stop. A couple of occasions here on this lap where all 4 tires leave the racing surface. So these guys are out there having to fight the truck, having to fight the track every single lap, and at the same time trying to either go on offense or defense when battling for position. So it's a lot to think about here for these drivers.
Oh, absolutely. The real problem is setting up a pass around here. You know, there's a lot of passing zones. The problem is setting up one, because that driver in front of you can check up the center of the corner really, really hard and get a really good drive off. It just makes it hard to get side by side, but Zach Henry is going to send it up the inside of turn 1 and absolutely clear Jake Miller like he had the anchor behind him.
So as we mentioned, next week is the first elimination race of the playoffs. We will whittle the grid down from 12 to 8. Already looking at drivers that would be going into Kentucky below that cut line. Lewis Woodall, our winner from the season opener at Daytona, certainly appears to be in that situation. Michael Sensi not making the start tonight. Barkuski with the early issues as well. Which says to me that you're going to have, 3-4 drivers that are going to try and win or point their way back in, but it's also going to be interesting with the fact we've got so many of our playoff contenders running up here in close proximity inside the top 10, top 15. The points are going to be really close around that cut line heading into that elimination race next week.
Oh, absolutely, especially with how big the order is mixed up here tonight. It's going to be a rough one, as I believe Hunter Madalinas just spun out of turn 1.
Yeah, brittle in the 10. Yep.
But, yeah.
Oh! And now he's going to, try and get back up through the gears, I guess, there. A little bit of wheel spin. He got the right side with that Armco barrier.
Yeah, it seems like those rear tires are a little bit squirrely. Don't wreck the leader, though. Oh,
wow.
Rough for our leader trying to get by that lap car there of Hunter Brittle. But as we were talking about, I was going to say that Kentucky's the one place where a lot of the guys that have had trouble or not shown up tonight actually perform extremely well versus their competition. I remember a year or two ago, pretty much all those guys being in the fight for the win at the end of the race, and so it might not be as bad of a situation as it seems currently here at Watkins Glen.
24 drivers still running on the racetrack. You see right there, that I believe was Aiden DuPont in the 00. Correction, that's Lewis Woodall, rather, in the 13, getting put a lap down. We've got 18 drivers on the lead lap right now. DuPont is the last of those. We do have some more drivers that have had some issues or have at least called it an early night. We already documented Henderson, Barkuski, and Nicewanger. Also add to that list Michael Barbagilata and Ty Aiken. They have both gone to the garage area at this point in time. So 24 drivers still soldiering on here as we are more than halfway through this race, and at least one more pit stop for these drivers to have to make, it would appear.
Yeah, absolutely. With where they pit and the amount of laps they ran from the start of the race, they absolutely have to make another pit stop, expecting that anywhere from around lap 36.
Oh, gosh, Tyler McClellan, all sorts of out of shape off the final corner, and Trent Curtis was putting the pressure on him, almost went into him there, not knowing which way the 95 was going to swerve.
Very good driving there from the 51 to avoid that incident, but as I was talking, it's hard to catch yourself when these drivers are struggling this hard to make it around this road course, but yeah, it's really a situation here where all these guys are just trying to figure things out, and they got to figure out what is the perfect time to pit to try and put yourself in the best track position possible. So far, it looks like pitting later is the way to go because, Jake Miller, he took the early pit stop, got passed by Zach Henry, and is now losing the gap to him. Josh Cottle jumped Christopher Heller, and he's not been able to retain the position ahead of him. He's also lost the spot. So it looks like those slightly newer tires is making the difference.
At the battle for 7th, Brent Kincott trying to hold off Austin Moore. Moore, we know, had that contact with McClellan out of the bus stop, dealing with that left side damage on his 91, but he's got about 3 lap fresher tires than Kincott. We'll see if he's going to be able to reel him in. Moore had actually been able to run down King Cott, who had about a second and a half over him. So certainly starting to see that those tires on the longer run, the advantage is going to the drivers that pitted later. Trent Curtis not that far behind there as well in that 51. If these two start getting a little bit racy, he might be able to get up here and make it a three-man fight for another spot inside the top 10.
Yeah, it looks like right here the closest fight on the racetrack is for the 7th position between Brett Kingcott and Austin Moore, and I've been periodically checking in on this, but it seems like Austin Moore has just not been able to get the run to get around Kingcott here. Kingcott actually having a very good, outstanding performance tonight here at Watkins Glen, but Austin Moore trying to get some more points for his playoff picture, and this could be a crucial spot for him heading into Kentucky.
Another good battle that's going on as well, just outside of the top 10. We'll fall back to that here. That's Gavin Fitzgerald trying to hold off Jordan Gonzalez, and might not be successful. Gonzalez going to show the nose to drivers left here, going through the final couple of turns.
Can he hold it around the outside? Very tough corner to do so. No, he's going to try and cross over, but it's just, that's the hardest corner to get drive off here at this entire racetrack, and it looks like it did not pay off there for Gonzalez. He loses the spot to Fitzgerald into 1, but he's been very good into turn 1. My gosh, he almost got into the back end there, but they're going to keep it going.
Saw him have to get hard on the brakes to avoid running to the back of Fitzgerald's 14. Almost had him shoot straight into turn 1. As we take a look here real quickly at the daytime weather conditions that these drivers are dealing with. Ambient temperature 80 degrees, but track temperature 100 even. We're talking about that rear grip on corner exit. Obviously, the weather's going to play havoc into that with a lot of wheel spin for these guys when they try and get back into the throttle.
Yeah, the hardest thing to balance here around this place is, I mentioned a little bit earlier that it seems like the front end grip is just a struggle around this racetrack, and as that starts to wear out, the rear tires start to wear out as well, because you just can't get the vehicle pointed out of the corners. And so as much as they're struggling to turn into the corner, they're struggling just as much to get off the corner every single lap they run around this place. It's making it very fun to watch from up here.
One thing I love about Watkins Glen as well when they put in the runoff is it gives drivers a lot more options in what they want to do as far as corner exit. You saw right there Jordan Gonzalez using a lot of that runoff off of turn 6, setting up for turn 7, trying to get some straightaway speed. Didn't quite work out to his benefit though, as he lost about a truck length to Gavin Fitzgerald, but gives these drivers more options in how to approach these turns. As you mentioned about Cottle losing the spot to Heller, he wants it back. He's closed up the gap to about a truck length between himself and the 11 for P5.
It seems like he's done a very good job of managing his tires so far. He's started off quite a bit slower, like I said, got passed by Heller, but he kind of wants to get it back, and we'll see what he does down here in the turn 1. He's going to kind of hold it a little bit, but he's going to take a slightly shallower entry, but he gets that truck pointed very, very well through the center of the corner, and I think he's done a very good job of preserving those front tires, which a lot of his competition's really struggling and starting to slide because of it. Ooh, he's got the big run here coming through the S's.
Will he show the nose? Heller got a little loose there coming out of the S's. Cottle will look to drivers right. Will let Heller let him have the spot? Nope, not able to stay. That right rear quarter panel was Cottle, so Heller hangs on to the 5th position for the moment. And you can see that 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, they've all encountered the lap traffic now. Ross Brockman in that mix, Lewis Woodall. So a lot of your lead lap drivers not only battling with each other, but having to battle their way around the lap machines as well. And I remember that several occasions when we had broadcast a track like this, I would throw out the question, which is it easier to be? Is it easier to be that lap machine, be able to find a place to get out of the way of the race leaders, or is it easier to be that lead lap machine and kind of be able to communicate to the car that's a lap down, saying, you know, this is an area I'm going to set you up and try and pass you, please give me the lane?
I feel like in that situation it has to be the lap car, because oftentimes just negotiating the road course by itself in these stock cars is such a big problem, even on your own, let alone while you're trying to get around a lap car just trying to do it themselves. But if you are the lap car, you can simply just not run the racing line and purposefully not make the racetrack. As we see kind of into the bus stop in front of Josh Cottle, he's struggling behind his lap car, which that's a place there's just nowhere else to go for the lap car. They have to take the regular line, and that completely blocks the lead lap cars from being able to get by.
We haven't talked really about the race leader, and that's because I think he's in an entirely different zip code right now. He might be at an entirely different racetrack. It's almost 12 and a half seconds now from Nicholson back to Hunter Madalinas. Nicholson looking for his second road course victory on the season. Of course, he won early on in the year at Long Beach. Oh, we got a wreck out of the final corner. Brockman and Woodall getting together there. Woodall's going to back it down towards the inside in case of oncoming traffic, but no caution going to come out here as we can see, and both those machines going to come to pit road. That was a battle for position for P20.
Well, the final corner strikes again, the one place outside of maybe the bus stop where you're going to see the most accidents here at this racetrack. It's just so easy to slip up, get sideways, or run into your competition by overdriving the corner entry. I've done it myself. It's very easy to do around here. But brings up the interesting question now is when do you pit? Because it seems like the pit window might just barely be open now.
Mentioned about the drivers that went with the strategy of coming to pit road early. While it gained them a bit of an advantage in the early going, did not pan out the longer the run went on. So I wonder if drivers will take that into consideration. Also bear in mind too, the longer you wait to come to pit lane, more than likely the less amount of fuel you would have to take on. But I don't know if you're going to change tires. Is there any advantage in something like that?
Well, the problem is the amount of time it takes you to fill the fuel tank is about the amount of time it takes you to put the tires on. I would think you might want to have some lighter fuel. It might mess up with the balance a little bit, but the extra weight taken off with how much you swing back and forth here at this place, especially through the bus stop, might help you on lap time.
There's only one driver inside the top 10 who did not start inside the top 10. That's the 51 of Trent Curtis. What a day he is having. Rolled off the grid, 14th place. Just got around Brent Kingcott to move himself up to the 8th position. Truck looks relatively clean, and he's been putting together a very good show here today at the Glen.
Yeah, well, he had actually left a message prior to the race start that he was trying to fix his trading paints, which allows you to put paint schemes on your vehicles, and he ended up missing out on making qualifying because of that. So he ended up starting in the back, but had decent speed as we see as he's currently running in the 8th position.
I'm going to wager a guess that his trading paints was sabotaged by a Dolphins fan.
Alright, well, we gotta watch out for that. Sabotage is a thing that can happen up and down the racetrack.
It was a heck of a game Sunday, a heck of a game between the Bills and the Dolphins. Not going to lie, either team could have won that one. As Nicholson, when does he come to pit road? We've already got a couple of drivers that have already hit the pit lane. Steve McLean, Steven Sims, and I believe Lewis Woodall, though his was to repair damage. We've got a couple more coming down. The aforementioned Curtis, as well as Brent Kingcott from 8th and 9th position.
Yeah, taking the pit stop just a slight bit earlier than their competition, but they're close enough to the window that it shouldn't really affect them too heavily on tires. I mean, we've seen what a big deal saving tires can make in the case of Josh Cottle, who went from being passed by a driver who pit in later to him to completely pulling away by 2.5 seconds. So it seems like you are able to save the tires and make them work if you pit early. It's just a matter of how much do you gain by pitting early.
Don't look now, but Zachary Henry is on the charge. He got around Jake Miller for 3rd, has since gapped himself back to the 4, and now all over the back door of Hunter Madalinas for the 2nd position, heading into the S's.
And Zach Henry's been very good at saving the tires. We saw it at Montreal. He did a very good job of doing that there. And as we see right here, he's done it once again, running up on the back bumper of Madalinas looking to get the spot from him. Bad place to try and make the move right here because the bus stop's just so hard to negotiate side by side, but where he really wants to do it is here out of the carousel or out of the final corner into turn 1.
And, while you can't necessarily make the pass there in the bus stop without running the possible risk that you or even the car that you're trying to pass might make contact and maybe end up throwing away the good runs you're having, you can kind of use that bus stop as an opportunity to play some mind games with the driver you're trying to pass. Run right up on his back bumper there until the braking zone, kind of make them question, are you going to be braking before they do, or are you going to run them over? And if you can kind of take their focus outside of the windshield towards the rearview mirror, you might have them maybe mess up that bus stop and be able to capitalize when you get to the carousel.
Oh, absolutely. That's probably one of the best spots on the racetrack to do it, because if you miss that braking zone even slightly and don't get into that first right-hander well and get it pointed straight, you will go straight outwards towards that outside wall or onto the grass on corner exit. It's a very easy corner to end up doing that. And as I'm talking here, I'm noticing some of the guys now in the top 5 starting to pit, with the case of Heller the last lap and Josh Cottle on this lap.
Battle still for that second spot between Madalinas and Henry. See if anybody else comes to pit road. Looks like Tyler McClellan and Nathan Jump. They are just now hitting pit lane. Saw some smoke right there through the carousel. Don't know necessarily if we had an incident or maybe a spin. Didn't see anything on the telemetry, but definitely was some smoke lingering there just coming off of the carousel corner.
Not sure what could have been going on there. Looks like we got a bunch more drivers coming down the pit lane. I heard Jake Miller say he was pitting now, in which, yes, he is. He's taking the right-hand turn to go down pit lane. We were spectating this battle for the second spot between Zach Henry and Madalinas. If I was Zach Henry right now with the pit window very comfortably open and competition around him starting to pit, I would just take the pit entry and just get ahead of Madalinas. You're not going to be going any faster sitting behind him than you will if you can manage to get in front of him. So I would simply just take the tires now, jump him when he has to pit, and have all the clean air you want going around this place.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that, because he would certainly get the advantage of the outlap on fresher tires, and he's kind of proved here on this run that he's got just as good a truck on the long run as he does on the short run. So yeah, take the advantage there of coming a lap earlier than the 9, and you may find yourself passing him by the time the pit stop cycle is complete. You look at some of these drivers right now, and obviously with the running order, we still have some that have to come to pit road. But we talk about the drivers that are going to be going to Kentucky next week in a must-win situation. What about drivers that might be able to lock themselves into the next round with just a decent run next week with what they're being able to do not only last week at Talladega, but following it up here at the Glen? Madalinas has been up inside the top 5 all day long. Same for Christopher Heller. Same for Zachary Henry. These are drivers that came with a pretty comfortable cushion over that 8th position in the standings, that cutoff line. And if they follow it up here today, obviously mathematically we can't say it until maybe like the green flag drops or midway through next week's Kentucky race, but they could be already locked into the playoffs just on points alone into the next round.
Yeah, well, that's the thing that Madalinas and Henry have to watch out for here. They both can borderline lock themselves into the next round at the end of this race due to the troubles of their competitors, but they're trying to race each other for pretty much a single point here between each other, and you know how competitors are. They get very aggressive with one another, but it seems like as they both pit on the same lap, that Madalinas was able to pull out a second gap on Henry, so that Henry kind of had a bit of a slow pit stop there, and it might end up costing him.
Jake Miller and Josh Cottle, they're in close proximity to each other in what could be a budding battle for the 4th position. And yeah, you talk about the fact that for Madalinas and Henry, they're battling for a position, they're battling for a point. And more often than not, us up here in the booth, we've got the opportunity to be able to look over the stats, look over the points and everything. The drivers out there, I asked them questions about that, and they say, I wasn't even thinking about points. I just wanted that spot that was up ahead of me. I think that's exactly what's going on with these drivers right now, is Got a good battle for the runner-up spot, another battle for that 4th position, so some spots here closing in on 10 laps to go could be exchanged in the closing stages of this Watkins Glen race.
That seems to be a common trend here in the Great Lakes Truck Series. I don't think you've said anything surprising there of, oh, I wasn't thinking about points, I just wanted to pass the guy, and then they end up wrecking each other. You know, it's just a common thing here in the series.
As soon as you put that helmet on, it's all business. Points are out the window. You leave that up to your crew chief or your spotter to let you know what that scenario is.
Yeah, they end up turning a vehicle into a metal sarcophagus sometimes, but, you know, they end up making it work out sometimes.
Miller has opened up a bit of a gap back to Cottle, about 3 truck lengths. It's also a bit of a gap right now from Madalinas back to Zachary Henry, so those battles for the moment dissipate, but they will more than likely rubber band right back up in just a few moments. Got a battle here for the 14th position. A couple of drivers we haven't talked about today. Eric Kemp in the 63, Steve McLean in the 75. Both of them right now, the last 2 trucks scored on the lead lap.
Yeah, and they might want to try and stay on the lead lap, but considering we are very unlikely to get a caution with the field spread out this much, it's pretty much just a battle between those two. I don't think the being on the lead lap really matters at this point in the event. So as long as they don't wreck each other, I'm sure they'll be at least happy that they made it to the end.
And you see just behind them is the race leader, Nathan Nicholson. There's that 99 who, after this cycle of pit stops, now has an over 17-second gap back to the 2nd place battle between Madalinas and Zachary Henry. So right now, the only driver that it appears can beat Nathan Nicholson is Nathan Nicholson. He's just got to put down 10 stellar laps, not put a wheel wrong, and bring that thing home in one piece.
Yeah, well, that's the thing you have to watch out for, is he is approaching a lot of lead lap traffic that he's very likely to end up catching in a minute here, as I believe McClellan's hitting the wall down the front straightaway, possibly steering issues, pretty much right in front of our leader heading down into turn 1.
Keep an eye on this here as McLean going to get to the outside of the 95. Not able to make that move, and now that's going to allow Nicholson to get around him and put him a lap down. Nicholson now is going to be the next one to approach that 95 truck, so we'll keep it on here just for the moment as apparent issues for Tyler McClellan in that 14th position. He will yield to the right and allow Nicholson around on driver's left heading towards the bus stop.
Yeah, McClellan seems to be one of the unfortunate stories of Watkins Glen tonight. He had a really good run early on inside the top 10, battling for some spots in the back half of the top 10, but several troubles and spins tonight has caused him to relegate to the back, and now currently a lap down as Nicholson negotiates the lap car of Eric Kempf, and now should be clear for at least a little bit. Now we can possibly go and look around, possibly this battle for the 4th position, which is starting to heat up, or the battle for 2nd.
Yeah, the thing that you mentioned with the field all spread out and the unlikelihood of cautions coming out, that kind of puts these drivers in a bit of a box midway to the end of the race. You run into an issue, you're not going to have nearly the amount of laps necessary to be able to mount even a bit of a comeback. You know, if you had early issues and you didn't hit anything, then you might be able to get some of those spots back that you lost, but for the most part, drivers that we've seen fall into that scenario, they took such big shots into the wall that they didn't even have a truck capable of being able to get back out there and pick up lost spots.
Oh, well, we could almost see the pass here for 4th. Josh Cottle tried to look forward. He seems to be very, very good through those slow corners, Josh Cottle. It's where he really struggles is through these fast corners. The S's, he really starts to lose out, and the bus stop he might struggle. And with the awkward timing of this lap truck here, it might cause problems for Miller, actually, as he's going to go wide on the entry. Cottle's going to back out of it and try and back up, but that might cost him some time. See if he can make it up through the carousel, where Miller's been very good at trying to negotiate through that corner and getting the drive off.
It was Lewis Woodall that they were trying to get around the lap truck as they make their way down the last straight before heading for turns 6 and 7. Riding on board here with the 32, and the thing I love with this camera shot is watching the hand motion it's not just a simple turn to the left, a simple turn to the right. There is a lot of back and forth with that steering wheel, as we've documented, trying to get those rear tires to grip when getting back to the throttle on corner exit, trying to get the truck low down on corner entry. I mean, these drivers, they are sawing on these steering wheels, and they've been doing it for 44 laps. They still got 7 more circuits.
Yeah, and these are going to be the most important 7 circuits of your life. You don't have to save the tires nearly as much as you had to earlier in the race because you knew that the runs were going to be full fuel tanks. But now, coming to the end here, the fuel tanks are possibly a little bit lower, and you know there's going to be a lot less laps to the finish at lap 50. So you're pretty much pushing for the most part, especially coming on to 5-6 laps to go here.
Going to be some good points days for a number of our playoff contenders. Matt Linus up inside of the top 5, as are Zachary Henry and Jake Miller. You've got Christopher Heller just outside of the top 5. Also good runs here for Austin Moore and Josh Cottle. One driver I'm a little bit worried about would be the 21 of RJ Williams. He's been trying to go a little off sequence. The last 2 green flag pit stops, he was one of the few that stayed out the longest. It hasn't really worked out to his benefit, and I'm now seeing that since I saw him running around the 18th, 19th position, he might have had a problem. He's on pit road 6 laps down, and looks like they might be repairing that truck. So the day has gone downhill in a hurry for another playoff driver who was close to that cutoff line coming into tonight.
Yeah, he would have been the 9th seed heading into this race if we count the fact that Senzi did not participate in this event, and with Barkowski basically finishing dead last here, he basically would have been in the playoff picture had he retained his spots. But now with this problem, it might end up turning this into a must-win for Kentucky, or at least, if not a must-win, a very, very good day.
Something I just noticed here that I think we may talk about next week at Kentucky, with the fact that Nicholson's out in front right now, and the likelihood is we're going to go 2 for 2 in a non-playoff driver winning a playoff race, where it comes down to every point for these playoff drivers. Elliott Henderson, he came into this race currently in the number 3 seed, had the early incident, sat on pit road for a majority of this race, but once they got that thing repaired enough where he could get back out to the racetrack, he went out, completed a few circuits. He picked up spots on Michael Barbagelata and Ty Aiken from 27th now up to 25th. 2 positions, 2 points might not seem like much, but who knows what the scenario is going to look like next week.
Yeah, and in the same breath, Barkowski actually is out on track as well, and he might end up getting the position on Michael Barbagelata as well before the finish of this race, but I don't believe he'll be able to get past Ty Aiken, who's currently about 9 laps in front of him. But that's another point for Barkowski that might make his chances slightly better, but looking at the rest of his competitors, it's still going to be rough into Kentucky.
Not sure which battle to follow here. You've got the battle still for 4th between Miller and Cottle, but as expected, that 12 truck's been very good on the long run, and he has closed up the gap between himself and Hunter Madalinas for the runner-up position. These 2 good battles inside of the top 5 taking place with less than 4 to go.
Yeah, I imagine this battle for 2nd might be the most intense on the racetrack for a pure racing standpoint, but the battle for 4th could be the most chaotic because those trucks have started to go all over the place. They've really been pushing the tires, and they're on slightly older tires than our leaders. And I've seen Jake Miller completely slip up out of the corner. I've seen Josh Cottle sliding through a majority of these corners. You know, both battles are going to be intense to watch here to the end.
Obviously, during this portion of the season, we focus a lot on the playoff contenders, but give a shout out to some of the non-playoff drivers and their performances here today. Dominant performance by Nathan Nicholson. You've got Trent Curtis here, who was able to work his way from outside the top 10 to right now in 7th. Brent Kincott currently in the 9th spot, and we just had an exchange for 10th, a battle for 10th. These 2 haven't been able to get away from each other, Jordan Gonzalez and Kevin Fitzgerald.
And this ends up being a very intense battle for the 10th position here. Fitzgerald a little bit loose off the corner. Again, that's the corner it's tough to get the power down on, as Eric Kef going to take advantage into turn 1. He makes the peak, doesn't try and make the pass, and it's a 5-car battle here for the 10th spot. This is going to be an intense one as Fitzgerald goes way off the track.
Oh, we got a spinner back there. I believe that was Steve McLean in the 75, just past the rumble strip there out of turn 1. Looks like he got that thing refired and continued on.
Oh, and we missed the pass for the 4th position by Josh Cottle. Jake Miller is now over a second behind. What ended up occurring here?
I'm almost wondering if maybe Miller might have nearly lost it or maybe spun, because the car that he is passing right now, I believe that's the 25 of Barkuski, he actually last lap around yielded to the leaders right here, went through the bus stop to give up, get out of the way of what was then the battle for 4th place. So Miller must have had some kind of a moment, but not sure where it was.
I was watching the replay. It looked like into the final corner, Miller just completely missed the braking zone, way overshot the corner, swung out wide, and basically handed the position to Josh Cottle. And now it's looking unlikely with the pace so even between those two that he's going to be able to get the spot back.
Nathan Nicholson took 2 to go, just a little while, and he will be coming around next time by to receive the white flag. 18 seconds back to Hunter Madalinas, who is still in a dogfight with Zachary Henry. By the time we end up having Nicholson come around and take that checkered flag, we're going to have nearly almost 3/4 of a lap to be able to follow this second place battle before they get back to the stripe to finish it out.
Yeah, but the pass might be made here on this lap. That whole section for Zach Henry was really, really good getting into the bus stop. He's got to make sure he stays close to get a run outside of the carousel here. It seems like Madalinas has just been able to hold off. Zach Henry is the lap car sideways. I believe that was it was James Shiflett. Nearly ended up causing an incident there. And they're spinning again. Steve McLean spins around out of the carousel in front of these two. My gosh, they just can't get away from Rex.
Just wiped out those caution cones there. A couple of them bounced right in front of Madalinas and Zach Henry. As the final lap has been taken by Nathan Nicholson. We'll pick him up when he comes around to take the checkered flag, but we're going to keep it here down to turn 1 in this battle for second place.
Yeah, those lap cars really cost Zach Henry a lot of valuable lap time. He's about a half second to 4/10 back. Look at the time he gained on corner entry, but he's going to lose some of it on corner exit as he misses the apex. That might cost him here, as he needs to gain the positions here to the back end of the lap, where really is the only spots you can really make passes. See if he can get any momentum going into this bus stop, because if he can't get close enough, it's just about over.
At this point in time, you don't care about preserving those tires. You're going to use up every bit of rubber that you can. Madalinas to try and hold Henry off as they take it through the bus stop. Nathan Nicholson going to make his way through the final couple of corners. He's coming around to pick up the victory here tonight. Second victory at a road course for driver 99 as he'll come around, checkered flag in the air, and Nicholson takes it at the Glen. We drop back again to that second place battle.
It doesn't look like Zach Henry is able to get close enough here. Madalinas, without making a mistake, is going to get through the final corner and secure his spot in the second position. Those will be our top 3.
Madalinas with the runner-up spot, Henry with third. Those two are going to look in pretty good shape going into the elimination race next week at Kentucky. Cottle crosses for 4th. Miller completes the top 5. We got maybe a battle going on here coming back to the start-finish line. Oh, no, actually, they just completed their lap, did the lap machines as well. There was a good battle going on between Tyler McClellan and Nathan Jump for 13th, but give it to the 95 of McClellan, who's had a couple of moments here today, so probably very happy to get out of upstate New York with a top 15 finish.
Yeah, solid runs for a good bunch of drivers tonight who really needed them, but some really catastrophic runs as well for some others tonight, including several of our playoff drivers who were looking good to start the event, but as it went on, just things went horrendously wrong.
Well, Nathan Nicholson, this will be his 3rd win on the season. Not only had the victory back at Long Beach, but also the week prior at Rockingham Speedway. So he will get ready to come down here onto the front straightaway and burn it down in front of these Watkins Glen fans. Second non-playoff driver here to take a checkered flag. So far, none of our playoff contenders have been able to officially lock themselves into the round of 8. We'll have to pretty much wait on the confirmation of who those 8 drivers will be next week at Kentucky Speedway. It looks like maybe Nicholson might be coming down here to turn 1 to maybe do the burnout.
You can get AJ Allmendinger style. I'm getting a few burnouts here.
So as Nathan Nicholson gets ready to celebrate here today at the Glen, now let's take a look at the finishing results from this evening's festivities. There we go. Right on that GoBowling.com logo. We gave you the top 5. 6th position for Christopher Heller, another playoff driver. Trent Curtis bringing it home in 7th. Austin Moore, another playoff driver there. Solid outing in 8th. And then the rest of the top 10 completed by non-playoff drivers. Brent Kingcott there in that 9th position. And Jordan Gonzalez won the battle between himself and Gavin Fitzgerald for that 10th position. Fitzgerald going to be just behind him in 11th. But those two, they had a dogfight there, whether they were battling for, when we first looked, the 13th position, or then eventually that final spot inside of the top 10.
Yeah, there were several good fights throughout the night here, but sadly the one fight we couldn't see even once tonight was for that win due to Nathan Nicholson's pure dominance, but there were several other guys tonight that had decent runs. Like I mentioned earlier, McClellan had a decent run, if not for some of the incidents, but on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, you had some playoff guys really finish poorly tonight, far back in the order, starting with the 21 of R.J. Williams, finishing all the way down in the 24th position. Elliot Henderson in 25th, and Brandon Barkuski in 27th, clawing back a couple spots.
One driver we didn't really talk much about tonight, playoff contender Nathan Jump. He had a 16th place run last week at Talladega, 14th place here tonight. It'll be interesting to see where he is in relation to that cut line. I think he'll be above it, but I'm not necessarily certain what the interval will be. He's had decent runs in the first 2 playoff races, but nothing at this point in time that looks like he would be locked into the next round. He'll be a question mark driver, I think, next week at Kentucky.
Yeah, well, luckily his performances on the ovals are quite a bit better than at the road courses. He pretty much did the bare minimum he needed to do tonight and just get the job done, even if it wasn't the best job possible. And starting above the line was definitely a good help for him coming into this event.
Here's the rest of the finisher results. Last week's winner, James Shiflett. We saw him have that moment in front of the leaders going into the carousel. He finishes 21st, 3 laps down. And, of course, the 3 big names here on this final page, R.J. Williams, Elliot Henderson, Brandon Barkuski, all playoff contenders finishing outside of the top 20. Henderson was the highest of those 3, so he will have had a little bit of a cushion to work with after last week at Talladega, but Williams and Barkuski, they might find themselves in a bit of a predicament going into next week's race at Kentucky. Only time will tell just what that scenario will be, but it's time to now go down trackside and see if we can talk with our podium finishers. Let's see if we can kick things off with the driver that brings it home in P3, and that would be Zach Henry.
Typically put it.
Hey, Zach, it's Alex and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
I do. How y'all doing?
Doing great. Well, I'll tell you what, we were watching you guys slipping and sliding out there, watching you guys have to yank on the wheel, counter steering through the corners here today. Very slick racetrack, but great battles all the way through the field. You bring it home in the 3rd position here today. I mean, you had a decent run last week at Talladega, had some good points over the cut line. So what was the goal coming into tonight's race, setting up for the elimination race next week?
I was going to try to win it. I mean, my favorite part about coming to these road courses is that it's kind of up to me for the most part. Just to not wreck myself. Once we get through the first lap or 2, we usually get pretty spread out, and as long as I can keep the truck under me, usually end up running pretty well. And, I had some speed. I was working with Nicholson, of course, over the last week and a half to really get some speed. And unfortunately, I just messed up my qualifying lap a little bit. But I think I could have ran with Nicholson for a few laps at least. I think he would have eventually pulled away. But I was definitely coming out here to try to win the race.
Well, I mean, you say at some point Nicholson would have pulled away, but at least compared to the rest of the field, you seem to have better long-run pace than a lot of your competitors near you, and I would like to ask what you think one of the keys were to trying to keep the tires underneath you to make sure you had something there on the long runs.
I think it was just the way that I was driving. I wasn't necessarily trying to save, but I feel like I was just really consistent in like rolling into the throttle and how I was shifting and where I was shifting. So there were a few different things I was doing to specifically save the rear tires, and you can see it pay off in the long run. It's just a pain to pass. So and I didn't want to move Hunter or get into him or ruin his race in any way. So he's ridden me clean ever since I've been in GLR. So I wasn't about to do anything to mess his race up.
So a very interesting first round. We had the wild card race to start this whole thing out, the super speedway race at Talladega, road course here tonight at Watkins Glen. Next week, we finish it off with the 1.5 Kentucky Speedway. A lot more drivers probably going to feel it's a much more level playing field, maybe an opportunity to control their destiny a little bit more if they aren't necessarily all that great at the road courses or don't feel their luck is good at the super speedways. The points have now been updated. You've got 31 points over that 8th in the standings cut line. So does that give you a little bit of flexibility to maybe be aggressive, go out there, try and be the first playoff driver to win a playoff race, or are you just looking for consistency next week to move on to the round of 8?
No, I'm gonna go out there and try to win the race. It's very rare when I'm not trying to win and I'm just going out there to get points. But with that big of a gap, chances are as long as I show up and probably put down a few laps or the minimum get through the first wreck of the race and a couple cars DNF with that kind of a gap to the cutoff, I should be okay to just be aggressive and try to go out to win the race.
Well, you heard him. He wants that checkered flag. Zachary Henry will look to do that next week at Kentucky. Brings it home third place here tonight at the Glen. Congratulations on a good run there, Zach. Before we let you go, we'll give you the opportunity to thank some sponsors and do some shout-outs.
First, 2511, and of course for this race in particular, Nathan Nicholson. It's pretty well known that I've been working with him for the better part of the last year and really working on this road racing stuff. And this is 2 races in a row where I've been borderline or having race winning pace. So it's good to see that stuff pay off. And I mean, really, the only car that was out there that was legitimately quicker than me was the guy that's been teaching me how to do the road racing stuff. So, and then Chris, Brandon, Jordan. It's always fun racing with those guys, and I feel like we all had solid races today. I haven't looked at the finishing results yet, other than I think Brandon was involved in an incident on like lap 1 or 2, but and that's unfortunate because he had some really, really good pace too, and likely would have been a borderline top 5 driver. And let's see, any family friends watching the race or watching the broadcast? I see my wife because she's just awesome, and then of course Undercurrents for riding on the hood of the truck. It's cool to represent those guys, and they've been doing some pretty cool things lately. And then you guys for doing the broadcast.
Zach Henry, third place finisher here tonight at the Glen, going to have a pretty good gap between himself and that cut line heading into the elimination race next week at Kentucky. Congratulations on a job well done once again, and best of luck next week.
Thank you. You have a good one.
And let's get our second place finisher here tonight, Hunter Madalinas. Hey, Hunter, it's Alex and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
Yeah, I got you.
I'll tell you what, it was a runaway for the lead, but it was a lot of fun to watch that battle for second place between yourself and the 12. We saw not only the mind games on the racetrack, but the mind games on pit road of when to come down for that next to last green flag pit stop, and of course that final pit stop, the money stop here. I mean, it looked fun to us up here in the booth. Was it fun down there in the cockpit of that number 9, or was it a little bit more of a struggle with the elements we saw you guys had to deal with today?
No, that was tons of fun. Actually being able to race, guys. I'm so glad that people are starting to put in practice for these road courses, and we're getting more and more guys running up front. It's always fun when you race people at road courses, but going into that part of the race, we weren't kind of thinking about Nicholson. It was more of like a battle for second is really the win type thing. So I think the battle that we had for about that entire race for that second position was, I think, really great racing.
And, I'm curious as to your points position heading into Kentucky, because you came into this race leading the point standings from the playoff picture, and with this great run to get a second place finish here. I mean, are you just going to treat next week as no holds bars, just get the victory or nothing, thinking that you're pretty much going to be locked in?
No, because there's still that slim chance that you can get eliminated next week. So I think my mentality into next week is really just finishing the race and trying getting like a top 15 at most. I'm not going into that race thinking I have to win that thing, but I'm certainly not thinking that a bad finish won't kill my playoff run. So I think next week isn't that much of a worry. The first two finishes being the highest playoff driver really pays off, and heading into Kentucky with nobody locked in, I have no reason really to worry about getting eliminated here.
You talk about preparation for tracks like Watkins Glen, and I want to ask, as a playoff contender here, the scenario looks like you're going to very easily, with good runs at Talladega last week, Watkins Glen here tonight, just a solid run next week in Kentucky, you move on to the round of 8. Is there any particular track there in the round of 8, New Hampshire, Hickory, Homestead, that you're going to be putting focus on here even before we get there in terms of testing, in terms of trying to figure out what types of strategy you can bring to the table in the attempt to then get into the Final Four? Does that start now, or do you wait until those particular weeks?
I certainly have normally waited till those particular weeks, but Hickory is a track that everyone's going to have to practice their best at. We're not getting a full field at Hickory. We're having elimination races, and I think I'm going to put about much as my effort going into there as just making sure I'm into the feature race and making sure that I can get decent points there. So I think if anyone that I'm looking at, it's going to be that race. I feel like I can run decent at New Hampshire, can run decent at Homestead. So I think as long as we have a good race at Hickory, it's just going to be like this one. I think we're going to easily be able to make the Final Four.
Well, Hunter, a great run for you here tonight. Second place, some really good points as well. Gives yourself a nice cushion over that cut line heading into the first elimination race next week at Kentucky. We look forward to seeing what you're able to do there. Before we let you go, we'll give you the opportunity here for some thank you sponsors and shout-outs.
Yeah, just thank you to Ellie Henderson and all of E95. Love racing with those guys each week. Thanks for Zach for making that finish at least a bit interesting for me. We had a really good battle, and thank you for you guys. I love that y'all put on these broadcasts each and every week, and I'm really appreciative of it.
Hunter Madalinas, he's going to bring it home second place here tonight at the Glen. Solid outing for that number 9 Monster Energy truck, and he'll look to lock himself into the round of 8 next week at Kentucky. Until then, Hunter, have a good evening. Congrats on the great run.
Thank you, guys.
Does not look like we have our race winner, Nathan Nicholson, available for interviews, so that is going to wind down our coverage here tonight from Watkins Glen. The final road course stop for these drivers here, Alex. Now from here on out, we've got 1.5 miles. We've, of course, got that elimination race, that short track race at Hickory that Hunter was just talking about. So these playoff drivers, their work isn't done just yet, but for the drivers that like the road courses, this was the swan song on the season.
Yeah, it's pretty much, hey, I could do pretty decent at road courses, and this is my time to get a lot of points, collect them up. Just a shame for those guys that it's in the first round and not any later than that. But the one thing I found interesting about those interviews was the difference between Zach Henry and Madalinas' point of view heading into next week. You saw Zach Henry pretty much say, oh, I'm just going to go for the win. Why not? I did well tonight. But Madalinas, on the complete other hand, he's just like, I just want to finish. I just want to make it to the next round.
Different drivers, different mentalities. And I think we're going to be talking a lot about that next week in terms of driver mentalities in regards to the playoff contenders, especially those down near the cut line. Eighth in the standings now after the update is Josh Cottle. So his hardships at Talladega, he bounces back, currently up in a spot that would move on into the next round. He's got only 9 points in hand over Brandon Barkuski, who dropped out of the top 8 to now 9th. 15 points back to R.J. Williams, 17 back to Lewis Woodall, and with not making the start here tonight, Michael Sensi's going to be 22 points back. So right now, all those drivers mathematically, depending on the size of the field next week, could have a shot of pointing their way in, might not necessarily have to win their way in, but that is just as important up above that cut line because plus 5 is Austin Moore, and then only plus 7 is Nathan Jump and Elliott Henderson. So there could be a lot of moving around of positions above and below that cut line, depending on what happens next week at Kentucky.
Yeah, there could be a lot of things moving around. I think, at least Kentucky, we're going to see a lot less moving than we may have seen tonight with some of the wrecks and some of the different outstanding performances and vice versa poor performances. But next week is essentially the week for a lot of the guys above the line to just say, I know I'm decent here, let's not get a wreck. And for the guys below to pretty much just go no holds bars and try and get everything they can.
Should be a good one, no doubt, as we prepare for the first elimination race of the playoffs here for the Great Lake Truck Series. We appreciate you folks tuning in here tonight to our coverage from the Glen. Again, apologies for the late start, but be sure to tune in next Tuesday night when we are in the Bluegrass State. Green Flag will be flying at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Alex, it's been a great one here tonight in New York. I appreciate you joining me up here in the booth.
Yeah, appreciate it as well, getting to do the home racetrack for me.
Yeah, home racetrack for me as well here. So once again, thanks to everybody that tuned in here tonight. We'll see you guys next week. For Alex Kolonix, I'm Seth Cole. You've been watching another broadcast courtesy of the FRN, the Flatout Racing Network.
This broadcast is the copyrighted work of Flatout Racing Network and may not be rebroadcast, retranslated, or used in any form without the express written consent of Flatout Racing Network and iRacing.com Motorsports Simulations. Flatout Racing Network would like to thank you for your support, and we hope